So in the morning, I talked about a way of really combining, I think, the beautiful teachings that you're offering with a kind of a perspective on the centrality of awareness that might come from a kind of, it's a long story, but this plane of possibility, this notion of what in physics you would call the quantum vacuum. So it's consistent with everything you're saying, yet it also allows for the things you're calling perceptions, these emergences from possibility into actuality, to certainly be the perceptions you're talking about, but it also allows for things to exist in the world outside of consciousness. So the question I have for you is this. Let's say you and I were to go have a meal, and we're talking with each other. We're very aware of our conversation with each other. So we eat our food, and the body is going to be digesting the food while we're having our conversation about awareness, being aware of each other, looking at each other, and the experience that we're having is a lovely conversation at dinner. And yet, outside of awareness, you have your body digesting food with all of the different molecular reactions and all the things that have to happen with enzymes. And finally, 12 hours later, whatever you do to process through the food. And you were not aware of all the metabolism going on with insulin and bringing the sugar out from the intestines into the bloodstream. And then, so all of those physiological things, which are not thoughts, they're not activities of the mind, in quote, that are so beautiful the way you're describing them. But it also gives room to say that in reality, you have a body, I have a body, we had a great time at dinner, and outside of awareness, our body was doing its body thing so that we could survive in a body. And I just want to see how you feel about that in your awareness. And otherwise, I think, because you didn't hear the morning thing, it would be so much fun to do a panel with you.
Let's do that. It really would be great. Let's do that. That would be fun. But just for the moment, let me respond to this. And maybe we don't have time to really explore it. But become aware now of the sensation of your right toe. Were you aware of the sensation before I drew your attention to it?
No.
Okay. Did the sensation start when I drew your attention to it, or was it already present but eclipsed due to the focus of your attention on our conversation?
So say the question again.
You acknowledge that the sensation of your toe didn't start when I drew your attention to it.
Well, that I wasn't aware of the sensation in my toe.
Okay, so do you think that...
you said,
Okay, you weren't aware of it. Sorry, I've jumped ahead. You weren't aware of the sensation. Do you think that my asking you the question about the sensation in your toe triggered the sensation? Or do you think it was always there, but you were simply not aware of it because of the exclusive focus of your attention on our conversation?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. So I'll give you, I'm sure, what you'll call a materialistic response.
No, but just give me a simple, I don't want a theory, I want your experience. Do you feel that the sensation started when I drew your attention to it, or do you think that it was always there, but you didn't notice it because you were focused on our conversation?
Yeah, I would say that you're asking me to focus my attention on it brought the sensation into awareness. But the sensation was probably there before.
Perfect, that's what I was hoping you'd say. Let's agree that the sensation was probably there before. I would suggest the sensation was there before. I would suggest that the sensation at the soles of our feet, that for each of us, the sensation at the soles of our feet has been present throughout this conversation for the last hour, but very few of us would have been aware of it because we were so focused on the content of our conversation. In other words, attention acts as a kind of filter that filters out by far the larger part of our experience. That, after all, our conversation, my words and your words, are a very small percentage of what is taking place. But due to the exclusive focus of our attention on the current object of experience. The rest is filtered out. Now, I would suggest that the finite mind is like a filtering process that filters out by far the larger part of consciousness, and that all the digestive processes that you describe are outside the finite mind, but inside consciousness.
So then what is consciousness if it's not an awareness?
Consciousness and awareness, I use the word synonymously.
Oh, you do?
Sorry, I use them synonymously.
No, that's great. Okay,
Yeah.
but if you're not aware of the digestive process going on, then how can you say it's an awareness when it's not an awareness?
Well,
That's what I'm confused about.
You are not aware of the woman sitting behind you. In other words, the perception, you have no perception of the woman sitting behind you. The woman sitting behind you is not part of your finite mind. But the woman sitting behind you is part of my finite mind. So we know from this that there is more than the content of our individual finite minds. We are not solipsists. I recognize that there are other finite minds, but I'm suggesting that there is more to consciousness than the content of the finite mind.
So you mean an individual awareness, like I'm not aware of, I want to look back at you, hi. So I'm not aware of her because I can't see her with my eyes. Now I'm aware because you mentioned it.
Yeah, she doesn't appear in your finite mind.
In my perception.
Or your perception.
Yeah, right.
Same thing, yeah.
So if I were to say then she is not in my awareness, but you would say that she is in consciousness?
But no, awareness and consciousness are the same.
Okay, then.
And so what I would say is that your finite mind, each of our finite minds, are a temporary limitation of the only, let's call it consciousness, of the only consciousness there is. In other words, the content of our minds is individual and limited. But I would suggest that each of our minds share the same consciousness.
You think so?
I do think so.
Okay.
So just as
what's your experience of that? I mean, how do
let me just imagine the analogy I sometimes use. Imagine a night watchman who sits on the edge of a construction site at night, and he has a screen, a monitor in front of him with a grid of 10 by 10 images. There are 100 CCTV cameras dotted around the construction site. They each convey a single image to his screen, but he sees all the images on the same screen. Now, the content of each image, the content of this image and the content of this image are completely separate. But the screen they share is the same. I would suggest that is an analogy. The contents of each of our finite minds are separate, but the reality of each of our minds is the same infinite and indivisible screen of awareness. What is the evidence for that? I would suggest it is love.
Hi there. My question is, how does transcendence, transcending the particular, the separate self, interact with desires of the most superficial nature and all the way to the most universal desires? What is the relationship of walking above it and desiring good for the world?
Your vision of transcendence is that awareness is somehow above and beyond experience. It is not. It is within and prior to experience. You don't have to escape from experience in order to access your true nature. You have to go deeply into the heart of experience and find out what is the source from which your experience rises. And so it's not a movement of transcendence. It's a movement of going deeply into yourself, inwards or selfwards or backwards. When I say backwards, I mean away from the objects that you are aware of, into the very essence of yourself, the source of your experience, which is aware of these objects. So it's an inward movement. It's not an escape from experience. And then having touched that in yourself, investigate its qualities, its nature, and then you allow that felt understanding to inform, first of all, your thoughts and your feelings, and subsequently your activities and relationships. So most people, when they go back, when they go to what they call themselves, they don't go all the way back to their essential, irreducible self. They just go to this self made out of thoughts and feelings, the apparently separate self. And having only gone that far, most people's thoughts and feelings are based on, express that self, are informed by that self, and their subsequent activities and relationships are an expression of that sense of oneself. So here we have to go further back, not just to this bundle of thoughts and feelings called myself. We go through the bundle of thoughts and feelings to that which is prior to them, our essential, irreducible being. And then we allow our thoughts and feelings to be informed by that felt understanding. And then subsequently our activities and relationships express those thoughts and feelings. So it's not that we cease having desires, it's rather that our desires no longer express the fears, the neuroses, the frustrations, the sense of lack that is inherent in the separate self. But our desires come directly from the fullness of our essential, irreducible being. And our desires as such are the means by which our essential being is brought out into the world of activities and relationships.
I had an experience this morning, actually before the morning meditation, as I was sitting quietly and I was thinking about the day, and I suddenly realized I was thinking, and I realized that the thought I was having, the perspective, the person I thought myself to be was simply the thought that I was having. I was mistaking myself for that thought. And then I realized that that applies to every thought. The person I think I am, the life I think I've had, this body, mind, and everything boils down to just a thought. And it blew me away. I suppose I don't have a particular question, just it was a realization that all I think is merely a thought.
Yes.
And a thought in consciousness, not my consciousness, but a thought in consciousness of which I am conscious.
Yes. So if you understand that what you previously considered yourself to be is just a thought about yourself, but is not yourself, then who are you? Because it's not enough to discover what you are not, although that is a very good and necessary first step. It's necessary to discover what you are. So having discovered I am not a thought, what are you?
I am the awareness that realized I was thinking.
Tell us about that.
It's the presence that is always here.
Yes, but I meant to tell us about its qualities, its nature. Don't describe. Try to tell us about its nature, because which is another way of saying, tell us about the nature of yourself. You have discovered that this is what you essentially are. So the first step is to discover what I am not. The second step is to discover what I am. And the third step is to discover the nature of what I am. So, having discovered I am awareness, tell us about the nature of the awareness that you know yourself to be.
Always available,
Yes?
open,
Yes?
accepting, warm, compassionate.
Can it be disturbed?
Awareness cannot be disturbed. No.
Do you, awareness, lack anything?
No.
So all that is necessary, having recognized this, is to stabilize this in your felt understanding so that it is not a brief glimpse of yourself, but is your stable felt understanding of yourself, and to live the implications of this recognition in all aspects of your life. That's a lifelong task for you.
I'm up for it. Thank you.
When the journey to God ends, the journey in God begins. The challenge is to continually surrender one's mind and one's body to this presence of awareness, or in religious language, to God's presence, and allow one's thoughts and feelings and activities and relationships to be more and more deeply informed by this felt understanding. So I am in the midst of that process, and I hope I always will be, just as everybody else is. And it's this understanding is tailored to every single situation. At the moment, this understanding is being tailored to your question. When I leave here, I may get a message from my son on my voicemail. I will then tailor my felt understanding to whatever situation is presented. And it's just a moment-by-moment response to whatever presents itself in my life from the place of this felt understanding. And if something in my life triggers a residue of belief, or more importantly, feeling of the separate self, rather than responding in that moment from the separate self, the challenge then is to pause, trace my way back to my essential self, reassert my feeling understanding of myself as that, and then turn outwards again and respond to the situation.